went live on Friday. She put up live our resource page we have with a number of links and pieces of information relating to the coronavirus. You find the link to the state's website, a memo from the Department of Water Resources, and a number of other pieces of information as we work through this strange time. I have, over the last few weeks, had a number of phone calls with state executives from the other associations throughout the Western United States as we talk about the various responses to the coronavirus and how our operations are being impacted. And a number of states, including Oregon and Colorado, have done a similar phone call where they got with their members and just kind of talked and understood what other folks are doing. What we're finding is that everybody's doing very similar things. We're all responding in a very similar manner, which for me is maybe comforting to know that in this strange and uncertain time, we're maybe doing it right. Before we get going though, a few housekeeping matters. I have muted everybody's line to avoid some of that background distraction noise. As we go through, you may have some questions. If you are on your computer, please use the chat feature to ask any questions. Catherine's here watching, and we'll make sure that if we have any questions, we get those answered. If you're on your phone and have a question, hit *9. What that will do is notify us that you have a question. We'll unmute your line, and then you can ask the question. Couple of association updates. Our office is closed, but we are checking email and phone messages daily. Catherine or I come into the office regularly to check mail. If you have need any information or have anything, you can get a hold of us directly again on that COVID-19 resource page. You see our emails and my cell phone number. Don't hesitate to give us a call. Catherine is working hard on getting the next edition of our newsletter out, the Idaho Water Watch. Check your email, check the website. We will have that out by the end of the week. We're also working on plans for our summer seminar. That is planned for June 8th and 9th at the Sun Valley Resort. We've had conversations with the hotel. We're working on it. Our plan is to move forward at this moment. Our plan is to move forward as usual, though we are interested to hear from you and your thoughts on that moving forward. So please send me or Catherine an email or give me a call on my cell phone and let's talk about it some more. We do have the program hammered out. Most of our speakers are secured, and so we're putting in some contingency plans in case we cannot go forward with the seminar as usual. But please let us know your thoughts. At this moment, we're being optimistic that our travel restrictions will be lifted and that we'll be able to get out and actually stretch a little bit. So with that, we have today a program to provide some updates from various folks in the region and the state to just kind of help us understand what's going on and what other folks are doing. You'll see here what's going on and what people are doing. You'll see here we have, first of all, Lori Gray and Brian Horsborough from Reclamation. Then we'll have Sam Eaton from the state giving an update, Gary Spackman from the department, and then a few of our members providing some updates. As we go through, if you have questions, again, please ask them in the chat or hit #9 or *9 on your phone if you're on the phone to let us know you have a question. We will try our best to get everybody's questions answered as we go. I do know that Sam and Reclamation folks have some other appointments this morning, so if you have questions, please ask them during their presentation and we'll try and get them answered before they have to go. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lori.
Good morning.
Fine, there we go. All right, Lori, you're up.
Yeah, there we go. Good morning, everybody. So today I wanted to cover two topics. One is to let everyone know that our area managers and Paul now are in possession of a letter signed by Deputy Commissioner for Operations David Palumbo that can be provided to the districts that are managing infrastructure, and copies made and provided to their employees that are out doing work. In case anyone is questioning why they're out, the letter is similar to what we use for reclamation employees, just recognizing that it's an essential function. So get with Brian or get with Paul to receive a copy of that letter. And then the second is just letting you know what we are doing with our key operations. And specifically, I'm talking about generating power and delivering water. We looked at the areas across our fleet where we needed to make sure that we could continue those two functions. We also looked at the hierarchy of control from a safety standpoint. And if you're familiar with that visual, it basically shows, PPE, protective personnel equipment, is the least effective in dealing with safety issues, and elimination or physically removing the hazard is the most effective. So given that, in reclamation, we have developed a document that lays out our approach for protecting the pilot at these critical areas. And we have three stages. The first stage is, being smart, keeping your distance, washing your hands, using individual keyboards or keyboard covers. The second level, which is the level we're in right now, is a little more extreme. What we have done is move to a skeleton crew, and that skeleton crew, we're working with them to prioritize the work that they can get done. And we have, for each facility, with only a couple of exceptions, 3 crews. So 3 skeleton crews. We take the workforce, we break them into 3. Each crew works 1 out of 3 weeks. What that does is allows us to ensure that we have 1 healthy crew that has been isolated for 14 days. So if someone on the crew becomes sick, we would assume that the whole crew is sick. We would send that crew home for a 14-day quarantine and testing. We would bring in the crew that has been isolated for 14 days and have them operate. So we're trying to work through the next level, which would be more of a lockdown scenario. But anytime we hear that we might have an exposure or we might have someone ill, we have contractors on board who can come in and do sanitizing type clean, and knock on wood, at our facilities we have had some concerns, but we've not had any tests that have come back positive. So we had a concern with a contractor, but when the test came back, the contractor's contact hadn't been exposed. So we're just really trying to close down access to the facilities. For our operations centers, we don't have people walking in and out. And like I said, folks either have their own keyboard and mouse, or we have gone through and provided covers. Whoever is working, they sanitize as they're going out. Who's coming in sanitizes as they come in. And so really trying to make sure that no matter what happens, we can keep these facilities operating and doing the work that we're tasked to do. I'll just stop there. Paul, anything else you wanted us to talk about, or Brian Horsborough, anything you would add to that description?
Yeah, Lori, this is Brian. Nothing I would add on Protect the Pilot.
I will say that in Idaho, we're probably in a better scenario than anywhere else we have in the region. Just because of our SCADA, we can operate from several different locations, and so that's a real positive.
Thank you very much, Lori and Brian. Does anybody have any questions for them? Again, if you have a question and you're on a computer, just type it in the chat. If you're on the phone, hit *9. Looks like
Paul,
you
this
explained
is
it perfectly.
Paul,
Well,
this
if
is
you think of
Brian.
Questions you can ask him later. Let's move on then to Sam Eaton to provide some updates from the state.
Thanks, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks to the Water Users Association for inviting me to today's chat. I can tell you that I think 3/4 of the world had never heard of Zoom meetings up until about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I think I had about one a year maybe, and now it seems like I'm lucky if I have less than one a day. But they've been useful and a helpful tool, and I'm sure we'll probably as a society continue to use them more now as we work through this. So I'm just going to kind of give a high level what's been going on from the governor's office perspective since about early March, and even before then. It's been pretty much 24/7 COVID-19 from the governor's office. It's been pretty interesting times. Obviously, I think everybody on staff has been pulled away from their day-to-day duties, and it's pretty much been COVID-19 all the time from the governor's office perspective. And I guess I should have introduced myself too, for those who don't know me. I'm Sam Eaton. I'm the policy director and legal counsel for the governor, and I focus largely on natural resource issues for the governor. I also do some legal work in other areas, but that's my primary focus. So I work with Paul quite a bit in the Water Users Association on some of their policies. So it seems like it was 6 months ago, but it's only been about a month since the governor put together his coronavirus working group. That group includes healthcare experts, agency heads, the schools, everybody that the governor felt needed to be at the table to kind of deal with this emergency as it comes. And then on March 13th, coincidentally, just a few hours before the first case was confirmed out of Blaine County, the governor issued his first emergency declaration, obviously declaring a state of emergency, which opens up some funds and those kind of things. And basically since then, and even before, I'm on conference calls half my day, it seems like, working with industry groups and agency partners, kind of working through the new norms, I guess, for how people are operating. Within a few days of the governor's first executive order declaring an emergency, we temporarily waived 125 rules at the state level. These were aimed at easing, operations and businesses. For example, we, in conjunction with Idaho State Police and the Transportation Department, waived the hours of service requirement for truckers that are carrying COVID supplies. That includes medical, PPE supplies, as well as groceries. We did amend some of the rules surrounding weight requirements. Obviously, we did everything with an eye towards public safety, but in conjunction with ITD, we were able to do that and waive a few of those things. We also waived some rules, largely focused on healthcare professionals. So if you had a recently retired nurse or doctor, we could waive some of the rules surrounding their licensure, making sure they were still up to date, but they didn't have to go in person to do their continuing education. They can do that stuff online now. And so we've waived some rules around there, and there's a whole host of stuff that we've been doing to try to combat this issue. And then, as many of you are aware, on March 25th, the governor issued his statewide stay-home order. That was obviously something he didn't take lightly. It was a tough decision, but it was based on the recommendations from the epidemiologists and the fact that we had community spread in a lot of our communities. So he made that decision. We modeled our stay-home order using a combination. We were kind of in the middle of the pack for states that moved that direction. So we were able to use some lessons learned from other states, what worked well, what didn't. And then we also used the federal, the Homeland Security guidance for what is considered essential. As you guys can imagine, that triggered an insane volume of questions, understandably so, surrounding what is considered essential. It's not an easy call. We tried to cite to the federal guidance. Obviously, most, if not all of you on this call fall within that essential category, working on water infrastructure or agriculture. Those are all essential. Even though you're essential, you still have to follow the social distancing guidelines of staying 6 feet away, washing your hands, cleaning surfaces, all those good practices. But that's been quite the issue, working through those, and we're trying to do the best we can. We know it always doesn't make sense, and it's definitely had an impact on businesses, and it's an understandable concern. And so we're still working through those. I can give you guys I can type into the chat a hotline that we've set up for people with questions. Not only essential, but it's most of the calls they get on that hotline is for, whether they're essential or not. We also get questions from employees saying, we don't think we're deemed essential, but our employer is telling us we are, are we or aren't we? And we try to filter as many of those questions through the call center as we can. They're all state employees, so it's not call center people that have no idea what's going on. They're health and welfare employees and others that have volunteered their time to take people's questions. And then if they can't answer the question, then they get filtered up to the governor's office, and we try to answer those. So I'll give you that number here in a second if you guys have questions on that. Obviously, this whole thing has had a huge impact on our businesses. The week of March 15th to March 21st, we had a 1,200% increase in unemployment claims filed with the Department of Labor. And they've just been inundated. In fact, I've heard some anecdotal stories about how long the wait times are trying to get a hold of them. They're trying to push people to their website, which is a lot easier for people to start filing their unemployment claims. It also has questions to answer. We get a lot of questions about, well, I'm self-employed, or I'm a contractor. Do I still qualify for insurance? And the CARES Act that was recently passed at the federal level, broadens the scope of the types of employees and employers that would qualify under unemployment. So I'll also type in the website and the phone number for people if they have questions for the Department of Labor. And then one thing that may be of interest to this group, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. We've got a lot of questions on outdoor recreation and what that means and what's allowed and what's not allowed. A lot of the smaller rural counties, understandably so, are upset about travel into their county from other counties within the state, as well as from out of state. We get that. So we've been constantly, in the governor's stay-home order, he does allow for outdoor recreation. That was based on his discussion and my discussions with the healthcare experts, and obviously outdoor recreating in Idaho lends itself pretty well to social distancing, which is good. It's the problems you get with outdoor rec are some of the pinch points, like boat ramps, trailheads, bathrooms, those kind of things are where you run into issues. And then we've seen the balloon kind of being squeezed a little bit because we had the state of Washington close down their fishing. And so we've been hearing a lot of Washingtonians are coming into North Idaho to fish. We have some hunting seasons that are opening up, turkey and bear, and some of those are coming up. So there's been some concern around those. So we've really been pushing messaging wise from the outdoor rec side to encourage people to do day trips, to stay close to home. Please don't go to these rural communities and wipe out their grocery store, because those are, needed for the locals that actually live around there. Pack everything, pack out everything that you bring in. Try to just use common sense and best practices if you're going to go out, and, try to stay close to home as much as you can. And then also on Saturday, our Fish and Game Commission voted to suspend from here on, from starting now moving forward, to suspend non-resident license tags for the spring hunts. The suspension is temporary. They'll reassess, in a month or so, and the government, depending on what the governor does with his stay-home order. But for the most part, we've tried to limit non-resident hunting and fishing to try to alleviate, because we've seen some issues over in the Salmon Chalice area with steelhead fishing and people not abiding by the social distancing because it's just too crowded. And we foresee some of that happening too. So to try to alleviate some of that congestion, we've restricted non-resident tags. Anybody that bought a tag up till now that lives out of state can still use those, but moving forward, they won't be able to purchase a tag until the commission votes to do away with that rule. So those are just some of the things we've been working on. If you have questions, type them in or ask me. It looks like there is a question from Keith. Is there a plan to lift the order, for example, if there are very few new cases over a certain time period? Yeah, that's a good question. So as you know, the order goes until it goes until April 15th. So, it's based on what the expert recommendations are, coming largely from the epidemiologists and those that are made a career on studying pandemics. So there's a few of those on the governor's task force. I can't say for certain. I mean, the April 15th date is coming up pretty quick. Don't hold me to it. I think it's very likely that there's some sort of stay home order that continues beyond April 15th. You probably saw President Trump last week extended his recommendations through the end of the month. We're constantly looking at things that we can do. I kind of use the analogy of twisting a knob. And, if we see on April 15th that these social distancing guidelines, the stay home order is having an effect on that curve that you've all heard about, that we're not inundating our hospitals and our health care workers, we might loosen the knob a little bit. I don't think we would totally do away with the order, but we might reassess what sort of activities are allowed as long as they're still complying with the social distancing and stuff like that. So if I were a betting man, I would put money on us looking at the order and seeing if there's things that we can do to make life a little easier. But if we're not seeing the results that we hope we see, we might, bunker down for a little bit longer. So it's honestly a day by day analysis. In fact, the governor's across the hall right now with his work group having their meeting, which they obviously do. The work group meets several times a week. The governor's not in every single one, but he tries to be in a lot of them. So he's meeting with them now. So I'll stop there if there's other questions.
This is Paul. Just as folks are thinking of questions again, if you have a question, hit *9 on your phone or enter it in to the chat box. Just a couple other pieces of information. You've probably heard that the state primary elections have all gone to absentee ballots. You can go onto that website. Links on our resource page to get your ballots, to get those in. And then the state's COVID-19 or coronavirus resource webpage is also a great place to go and look and see. You get a lot of information, all these executive orders that Sam talked about, daily counts of confirmed cases are on there. I believe it's updated at 5 o'clock or so each day. So we do have one question here, Sam. How is the state responding to the EPA suspension of environmental enforcement. Have you seen, what's your involvement or experience with that?
Yeah, I'd probably defer that largely to our to DEQ. I haven't been. I've heard about EPA enforcing some of their administrative enforcement, but I haven't been involved directly in those discussions with EPA, so I can't answer that well. But I can definitely find out and get back to you guys. And I did have this probably won't relate too much to you. I have been working a little bit with DEQ around some rule waivers. For example, we're looking at waiving, this was an issue that actually was pretty new to me, with winter fuel versus summer fuel, because, there's been a huge economic slowdown as well as a restriction on travel. Fuel consumption's been way down. I can't remember the percentage was. It's like 30 or 40% down below the normal. And so all the convenience stores and the staging areas that contain fuel are stocked full of winter fuel, and they will be for a while longer. But there's a requirement the EPA has that they have to switch over to summer fuel here pretty soon, and there's just no way that they're going to be able to get rid of their winter fuel in time for that. So we're looking at alleviating some of those timelines surrounding that. But I'll have to follow up with Paul, and he can disseminate that information on the EPA's lack of enforcement or suspension of enforcement.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us that phone number? So when we post this, we're just going to post the audio of this, but we'll make sure that this phone number gets on our webpage, our resource webpage. Can you tell us what that hotline number is?
I was muted, sorry. Sure, I'll give you two numbers, then I'll write them in the chat here. So if you have questions about, what's essential or other kind of general COVID-19 questions, you can call 1-888-330-3010. And then they'll kind of filter your questions based on, they'll filter you to the right person depending on what your question is related to that. But if you have, if you say the word essential, they'll get you to somebody to hopefully get your question answered. And then if you have, if you or your employees have questions about unemployment, I know Department of Labor's preference would be that you go to their website, which is idahoatwork.com. Or you can call their number, which is 208-332-8942. But again, I know that line is pretty jammed up, and I think you can get a lot done on the website. But they have a whole FAQ section. I was actually looking at it before this call, and it's it's pretty helpful for a lot of the questions we get asked. We get asked a lot if I'm an employee and my employer is essential, but me as an employee, I feel like I'm in an at-risk job. Say I'm working at a grocery store that's in the middle of an area that has a high percentage of COVID-19 cases, and I just, for the health and welfare of myself and my family, I just don't feel comfortable working at that grocery store, for an example, anymore. Can I qualify for unemployment? That's something that's a case-by-case basis, but there is the potential for that. Obviously, we don't want to incentivize people just not working and taking unemployment because they can. It has to be for the right reasons. Anyway.
Thank you. I did just get a note from Steve Hauser in the comments that nonprofit organizations are eligible for the payroll support loans being issued by the SBA. So any who might be interested or want to look more into that, talk to your banker. Are there any other questions for Sam? All right. Thank you, Sam, very much for your time. I know you've got a lot going on, but thank you. Thank you for your time. Next up is Gary Spackman Director Spackman to give us a department update.
Paul, can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay. Well, friends and water users, it's nice to be able to talk to you. It's almost more discomforting than being in front of or behind a podium at your meetings. Just as a lead-in, I saw some of the pictures of Dan Davidson. Couldn't tell whether he was in bed or not, and others out there who look pretty relaxed. So as you're watching TV, Harold, there are a lot of episodes of Bonanza on YouTube, and I would recommend those to you. And there's one in particular called The Value of Water, or The Worth of Water. And it's an hour-long episode. I excerpted some of it, but you can learn a lot about well drilling and diverting water from that particular episode. So you can actually, while you relax, learn something about water in the West. I want to, initially, at the risk of appearing to be a rubber stamp director, I want to recognize and support the order that was issued by, the proclamation and then the subsequent order that was issued by the governor's office. And I know there's some backlash that's come from that, but I think it took a lot of courage on his part to do what he needed to do. And I think we all need to get behind and support it. And so as I work through what's happening in the department, many of you should have seen a memorandum that the department issued on March 31st. And this was issued as information for the water users and the water user community. And we recognize the emergency proclamation and the order from Director Dave Jepson that stated that governmental agencies are to cease non-essential operations at physical locations in the state of Idaho. And the implementation of this order has taken us some time, but we have closed all of our offices, both the state office and the regional offices, and our satellite office in Salmon to the general public. Now, I want to emphasize to everybody that many of the people who are employed at the department offices are working from home. We've had some difficulty in establishing computer connections for all of the employees. We have worked through what's called a COOP plan. It's a continuity of operations plan that's required by the state, and we have produced a specific response for this COVID-19, defining what functions are essential and non-essential. And in addressing the essential functions, then we have a skeletal crew or a minimal crew at each of the offices. And I want to at least refer to the memo that was issued March 31st. I state in the memo that a live department employee will answer the telephone. So if you call any of our offices, there is someone that is answering the telephone and will respond to your inquiries. Now, it may be possible that that person, either because of a lunch or some other break, you may be sent to a voicemail, but I think those instances will be rare, and we thought it was important that the water user community be able to communicate with the department. Now, I'll just tell you in the state office here that we probably have half a dozen people in every day. So I have been in every day. I will start taking Tuesdays and Thursdays off, and we'll have a rotation here just to minimize the number of people. But we are receiving mail every day. We're opening the mail. We're scanning what comes in. And those scanned documents should be available to the public. We're also receiving deposits. So anything that we receive in money or payment of some other type will be deposited every day. And then, so we have people from our financial group. We have a person from our computer, our IT group, and we also have some representation from human resources. And that's really about the skeleton crew we have, other than a receptionist, somebody to answer the phones. I will tell you that the amount of traffic, certainly physical traffic, has been reduced. I also want to say that the water center itself is closed. So the University of Idaho actually closed the outer doors. So there's really no access up to our offices on the 5th and 6th floor. And I would encourage anybody that needs to drop something off, if it's a protest or some other document here in Boise, to go to our regional office out on Airport Way. And if you need to leave something, either call ahead, or I think if you knock on the door, somebody will come and receive the document. So there are people at all of our offices. Now I want to talk just briefly about essential functions. And I want to just mention that what you are doing, most of you who are the agricultural backbone really of Idaho, what you are doing in your work is an essential function in two ways. One is you're growing food for the nation, and that there isn't anything more essential than that. And number two, honestly, your work is essential because I suspect that agricultural Idaho will bring the state of Idaho out of any sort of economic downturn. And I've seen that happen before. So I think in two ways, although the latter is not necessarily essential, as the shutdowns that only allow essential services to happen are impacting other people. I think your essential services out there and marks twofold the importance of what you do. And so we want to support fully your efforts and the needed irrigation and irrigation water deliveries. So all of our people who are involved in those deliveries will be available. If you call our offices, you need to talk to one of those people. The person answering the phone will send you to that person's telephone number, and most of those numbers internally have been forwarded to their home phones. So anybody that's involved in our offices in assisting with the accounting of water, the deliveries of water, necessary measurements to ensure that the correct amount of water is being delivered, those people will be available. They're working remotely, but may need to come into the office if needed to assist with those deliveries. So there should not be any interruption in the deliveries and the accounting of water delivery. We also are right now measuring groundwater levels for our annual synoptic measurements. And we debated internally whether this is an essential function, but we felt it was important to measure those groundwater levels to support the settlement agreement that was struck in the ESPA between the Surface Water Coalition and the Idaho Groundwater Appropriators. And without that information, we would have gaps and questions about the progress that is being made through the efforts of the state and the water users themselves. We are sending people out on day trips. We're telling them we don't want them staying overnight. And so we're working both out of our regional offices and the state offices to perform those measurements. And they should be completed by the middle of April. The travel that these folks are taking, we have instructed them not to drive any vehicle that has 1A plates. No, I'm kidding. But all of our vehicles should have X plates on them. They are armed with letters that I have signed that authorize them to be in the field to perform their work. And should anybody ask, we have also discouraged those folks from frequenting restaurants if they're still open, and convenience stores. Certainly they'll need gasoline, but we've asked them to minimize their visits in public places. And much of the work that they do is outside anyway and is isolated. I want to talk about a couple of other essential functions, and I'll just highlight that there was an earthquake last week, and when those kinds of emergencies happen, we have a safety of dams program, and I will tell you that the people who are charged with that responsibility, they were on the telephone, both John Falk here in the state office and his coordinating staff in the regional offices. And of course, there was cross coordination between the federal entities. And there were a couple of concerns. One of those concerns was that the Thompson Creek mining operation upstream on Salmon River from Chalice, I think between Clayton and Chalice, and there was an assessment that was completed by Thompson Creek. Our staff didn't go up there, but I don't need to go into the detail other than to tell you that there was an assessment of the tailings dams up there and whether there was any damage to them, whether there was any increase in outflow from some of the monitored sites below the dams, and it appears that everything is okay. There are a few private dams around, but certainly any of those emergency operations that the department engages in are essential functions as well. I again want to reiterate that what you are doing is important out there. I also want to tell you that we sent out a memorandum on April 1st to the water masters and informed the water masters of state and water districts that they are also performing an essential function in delivering the water. And where we don't have rigorous accounting in some of these water districts, staff, particularly in our regional offices, also have a letter from me that authorizes them to assist the water masters in water districts when there are questions about water delivery. And we have asked staff and the water masters again to adhere to the social distancing requirements and cleanliness requirements to ensure the maximum safety that we can in the field. I know Matt Weaver is on the phone. Matt, do you have anything to add? Well, Paul, that's all I have.
Thank you, Gary. We did get one question on, and I'm posing this in the chat. One question in the chat. I'll pose this to everybody, but to you as well, if you've heard anything. The question was whether any canal companies or irrigation districts have had any difficulty with local authorities for having been working, or I guess I would extend that to your folks, Gary, if anybody out there. I can tell you just really quick, we did send an email out to our members asking that very question. And aside from, I think we had one sheriff expressing concern about some social distancing issues, we have not had anybody have any problems with local authorities. Has the department, or have you heard of any Gary?
I've heard of none. Of course, we're just starting into the water delivery time period. So we may have some additional inquiries, and I just encourage everybody to, as well as encourage IDWR's employees, that we observe those standards as much as we can, but also be very respectful of people in those local communities. And I know Sam talked a little bit about the concern in those local areas, and I have heard a couple of reports, not on the ditch bank necessarily, but of actual skirmishes where people from the urban areas are showing up in the rural areas, and I don't want to have our folks anywhere close to those kinds of problems. So we don't want our employees to push any of those limits at all.
Thank you. Any other questions for Gary or about the department? I don't see any, Gary. So
Okay.
We'll thank you very much for your time. So last week, or a couple weeks ago, Catherine and I sent out an email to the members asking for information about how your operations are being impacted, what's going on, and those kinds of things. And we did get a number of responses, and we asked a few of our members to just kind of fill everybody in on what they're doing. And so we're going to have first Aaron Dowling, second John Lind, and then third Brian Olmstead give us just a little bit of a update on what they're doing. And Brian, I think, also has some information on their response to the earthquake. So Aaron, you're up.
Okay, sounds good. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'll be really brief. I guess to start with, our office is closed, has been since the governor's order. We do have a drop box where people can drop payments if they come by the office. And we are checking that drop box daily along with the mail. However, it is optional for all office staff to work from home if they prefer. We do have some projects going on in the field that we feel like are critical for this irrigation season, as well as the setup of some measurement stations. And in those cases, we're trying to have people work alone whenever possible, but no more than groups of 2 for sure. And that includes not just our own staff, but contractors as well. So that's all. We haven't done anything beyond that. Continuing to do the work we have to do. Just in some cases, it's from home, and a lot more through the phone and conference calls.
Thank you. John Lind.
All right, thanks, Paul. We're doing most of the same things that Aaron talked about. Our office is closed to foot traffic. We have a drop box in our entryway for payments. But we have been alternating our office staff, trying to minimize overlap. I also sent out a letter last week instructing the employees not to report to work if they are feeling sick, just to communicate with their supervisor and go see their healthcare provider. So hopefully we're being proactive and, people not coming into work sick and spreading it. We haven't had any cases at all. We've had some folks with flu-like symptoms, but they've got checked out and cleared by their doctor. So we're keeping a close eye on that, like everybody is. That's pretty much what we're doing. It's other than the office staff, it's business as usual for us with social distancing. So no more, coming early to work and having coffee with the crew. It's come to work, go straight to your truck or equipment, and natural operations, people are just kind of dispersed anyway. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, John. Brian?
Hey, Paul, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll report first on the earthquakes for a change of pace. We had a pretty good shake here in Twin Falls, and so, of course, our dam tender felt it, and our protocol is with where Twin Falls and Northside cooperate Milner Dam, and then also along with Idaho Power when the power plant is operating, which it is now. So the dam tender, of course, immediately went out that evening and checked, a good walk over the whole dam, and didn't find anything. Then Idaho Power's employees did the same thing, and of course inspected their power plant. And then because we have the power plant there, we have a FERC requirement also. So FERC notified us the next day that we had to do another inspection and send a full report to them. So the dam tender did another one, and that just includes things like the piezometers, the tow drains, and looking for any cracking or that kind of stuff. And it was a pretty minor shake here, really, compared to the Wells one, say, a few years ago. And so it doesn't look like there's any cracks of any sort, or no increased turbidity or anything in the tow drain. So probably nothing there, other than we'll just have more FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission reports to fill out. And those have been very, I guess you'd almost say, draconian ever since the Oroville disaster there a few years ago. They pretty much go over Milner Dam every year with a fine-tooth comb, but it's a good solid dam. On the coronavirus, pretty much like the other guys, we turned the water into the canal about 10 days ago now. So we're charging the system. So we have our full crews are out. They are not mustering at the break room or the shop in the mornings now. They go straight to their, they each have their own pretty much truck and a piece of equipment or a ditch rider truck that they operate. So everybody's pretty much self-isolated anyway. We don't have anybody coming into the coffee pot, for instance, anymore. And so it's, if they need to talk to the water master, they talk outside, or if they need to exchange something, they put it out on the picnic table outside. So just trying to keep people as far apart as we can. There's 4 girls in the office, and of course we have to keep the office going, so they rotate. There's two in the office each day, and their desks are pretty widely separated. So, and we have no foot traffic coming in. We have the drop box, and of course most of the people paying are doing it by credit card these days, or mailing in. So other than that, we haven't had anybody quarantined or anybody with immediate family that's had an issue, but there have been quite a few cases. I think about 37 in Twin Falls County, and maybe partly because of the the healthcare system sharing with Blaine County. Some of those patients have come down from the Blaine County outbreak to Twin Falls. So there's quite a few healthcare workers in Twin Falls that have been exposed or quarantined, or a few even that have had the virus, but nobody in the canal company. And so we had the press release when we turned the water on, and they asked us about it then, and I pretty much told them, you will see our employees out. We're going full guns right now, trying to get ready to deliver water next week. So, but they're all, they can stay very isolated out on all of the jobs that we do. Any questions,
Brian.
Paul?
Thank you, Brian, and John and Aaron, very much. So those are the presentations and the updates that we wanted to have for folks. Now an opportunity, if there are any other questions or just general discussion points. We have a few in the chat box that if folks want to give their input. We have a question about meeting platforms that folks are using. We've got Zoom here, we've got GoToMeeting, and there's WebEx, there's others. Are folks using any of these, and what are they having success with? I can tell you as a side note, there have been concerns about Zoom being hacked. Catherine and I have been reading articles and stuff and trying to set these up the best we can to minimize that. Though we do continue to watch. I know some have used GoToMeeting, and maybe others use other programs. Another question we have are other office staff rotating days and things like that. So a few minutes left here. If folks have any comments or other questions, we've got a lot of folks on the line that may be able to help us understand or maybe navigate some of these difficult times. If you're on the phone, you can hit *6 to unmute yourself. If you're on the computer, you can just click the mute button.
Hi, Paul. This is Steve.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I just noticed that Annette answered the question. Never mind. She just said that we're rotating mornings and afternoon duties between 2 office staff, and we have remote one person working remotely from home, and phones are managed all day long, but the office is still closed. And we're trying to get enough masks together for all of our employees.
Thank you. And Barney Metz up in Lewiston wrote that they're not rotating staff between their potable water, their irrigation water, and their ESA obligations. They're fully staffed, fully functioning, but they are exercising appropriate measures to ensure safety of their staff. While folks are thinking of questions, just an update, we've been recording this. We'll post the audio of this on our webpage as soon as we can. We'll shoot out an email here later today with a copy of that letter that Lori referenced earlier, as well as those phone numbers that Sam gave us. You can continue to check our website. As we get information, we will update it to the website. We will continue to send emails. If there's anything else that you might need to know or want us to help with, let us know. Again, look for the newsletter later this week, and send me or Catherine an email with your thoughts on the summer seminar. It is coming up quickly. Like I said, we've got a program figured out, but we are putting into place some alternate plans should this pandemic issue affect that. But we're curious to know your thoughts and feelings on that. But as far as the topics of the day, are there any other questions or comments?
Hey, Paul, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Neil Shippey. I had a question on quarantine. Does anybody had any thought if somebody's family was exposed, if they could still ride ditch as long as they weren't in contact with anybody other, any people stopping at the gas station or anything like that, just stayed in their ditch ride and pick up? And as far as a quarantine situation?
We're quarantined. Somebody calls them sick, they stay home.
Why don't you?
This is Donald Knapp from Meridian Irrigation District. Our shop has established the policy, anybody that feels sick or becomes sick, that they stay at home until they get released from their doctor.
Has that been extended to folks whose family members have gotten sick?
If they're in the same household.
So Nampa and Meridian, their policy is stay home if you or somebody in your household is sick.
Until they have a doctor's clearance.
Until you're cleared. Okay. Looks like Burley Irrigation District has the same policy. Any other comments or questions?
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
It's Tom Myram from Washington State.
An intermeddler.
Yeah. Well, I had the opportunity, Paul, to let your folks know that our Tri-State meeting for May 15th will probably be through a Zoom type platform. If not Zoom specific, it'll be something like this. maybe a couple hours as opposed to our normal 4 to 5 hour meeting. So just, I will put out a general notice on that, but since I had the opportunity, I thought I'd tell folks. But I do have one specific question that came to me from one of our members. One of our districts is particularly urbanized with small accounts, and our municipal water purveyors have the ability to forego payments during, not have late payments during the period of this COVID emergency. But the irrigation district statutes don't seem to have that latitude built into them. So I wonder if any of your folks with the smaller accounts especially are doing anything to allow late payments. Typically a late payment means you don't get your water turned on time. Just curious if your state statutes allow for that, or if your operational flexibility allows for late payments.
I'll give my 2 cents, and then if anybody else has other thoughts, let me know. And most of our assessment invoices go out at the end of last year, and a lot of those payments have been made by now, though some may be coming in later in the year. I can see Burley Irrigation District has no payment adjustments, and it looks like another canal company does have a grace period of 30 days. But I'm not sure that I know I haven't heard that this has affected payments, or that folks have adjusted payments otherwise. Anybody else?
Paul,
Hey,
this
Paul.
is Barney Metz with the Lewiston Orchard Irrigation District. So we actually, the city manager for the Lewiston is now the civil defense manager, and has some broad authorities under an emergency declaration by the city of Lewiston. And they directed their staff on their water and sewer and garbage side, and the 2 sewer districts within the area, and Lloyd, which does irrigation and domestic water, that we are not allowed to charge penalties, interest, and not shut off people for non-payment during this time. And on the domestic side, our board has taken that option and moved forward. And under discussions with our attorney, we are not going to charge interest during the COVID time. And we won't shut off people for non-payment, which is a lack of a moot point, because we wouldn't do it during this time anyway. They're already off for non-payment. So we're working through that issue, but we had some pretty heavy concerns being directed to violate what is considered state law on this versus what in reality is going on. So we're still kind of dealing with the interest part of it on accounts for the non-payments during this time. But right now we're not shutting anybody off on the domestic side or the irrigation side, and we're not charging interest or penalties during these COVID times until these orders are lifted.
Interesting. We did get 3 more comments in the chat line of additional districts who are not making any who have not made any payment adjustments.
Hey, Paul, this is Brian. We of course sent out our notices in November, so most people are paid, but really the only enforcement we have is we don't turn the water on until you've paid. So that way we don't ever have to turn anybody off for non-payment. So nobody's been turned on yet, and nobody will be turned on until they make their payment. So if they don't want to pay for the year, that's okay, but it will be a 1% interest per month until they eventually do pay. But generally people pay because they want their water turned on, and we don't really have domestic or the only municipals are really the city of Twin Falls, for instance. So we don't have individual municipal turn-ons or anything like that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, then I guess I'd say thank you, everybody, for getting on, and thank you for sharing your information. Thank you to those who participated. We appreciate it. Stay clean, stay healthy. Talk to you later.